first and foremost, good afternoon, everybody. Wanted to welcome you to our event today, which is focused on controlling the sprawling SaaS spend that we know is really a challenge for everybody, regardless of industry or type of organization. And we have appropriately named our event Herding Cats. As we get started, before we dive right into the subject matter, I'm actually going to take a minute just to introduce and give you a little bit of information about what SIB is. We are a professional services firm focused on cost optimization and efficiencies. We've been in business for over 35 years and have the world's largest spend data set as across the board. And one of the things that we are most passionate about is really making sure that everybody that we work with is set up to never overpay for any services that they're interested in. We really focus on being the superpower for our clients, being those insider experts that are helping giving back time, money, and resources that our clients can reinvest into their operations. A couple of things in terms of who we are, what we stand for, and how we do this. What we are not is a implementation or service provider. So that means we are completely independent and objective, which allows us to focus on the number one aspect that's centered around everything we do, which is our customer. We are focused on not just cost reduction and cost optimization, but we'll work with our clients to do everything from contract reviews, negotiations and procurement, contract lifecycle management, and really identifying opportunities to have better agreements, drive efficiencies to ultimately improve operations. All of that without actually disrupting the operations for our clients. So diving into a couple of different things of the kinds of areas that we typically work with, here you see I'd say the most common types of spend areas that we operate in, but really we work with clients in over 50 different spend areas. Everything from telecom to looking at waste, utilities, shipping, merchant services. And today's conversation exclusively is going to be focused on software as a service. This is going to be the first of a series of tech-focused events that we'll be doing throughout the year. And we felt it was appropriate to really kick off the first quarter with this topic, because as we know, annually we're seeing that SaaS spend increase across the board anywhere from 15% or higher. And we're expecting a larger increase this year. So we wanted to get right off to the start of the year, focusing on a topic that is coming to us quite often and a big challenge for a number of organizations and companies. So to give you an idea of who your presenters are, my name is Anamika with Howen. I have the pleasure of managing our sales organization at SIB. I've worked in professional services for the better part of 18 plus years, helping grow organizations. And a large part of my career has really been in the tech space, everything from having done implementation in infrastructure, app, and also really providing consulting services across, to help people deploy strategies and tactics across their tech portfolio. With me, I have the pleasure of our lead here and our tech subject matter expert, Ken Daw. So Ken, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce yourself and take us away.
Thank you, Nami, and thank you everyone for attending. My name is Ken Dahl, and I'm the Director of IT Spend here at SIB. I've been in the telecom space for over 21 years, and then just naturally got into the SaaS and infrastructure areas because of the trend of moving from off-prem, or I should say on-prem to off-prem. I've done everything from auditing to inventory builds, even building out SaaS software myself built on ServiceNow. But that's enough about me. I'd love to get into what we're going to talk about for today's session. So I just want to briefly highlight our agenda if I can. We're going to be talking about the current state of SaaS spend, essentially why we named the presentation Herding Cats, because if you aren't managing spend properly, sometimes it can really feel that way. We want to talk about how SaaS got to be such a large sticking point for numerous organizations and why SaaS spend can really get out of control very quickly. We then want to talk about some of the key challenges in managing SaaS, what those drivers are, what those root causes are, really pinpointing why some organizations are struggling to keep their SaaS spend under control. I then want to be a little nerdy and then highlight the difference between SaaS and infrastructure. There is a clear distinction between these two services, and I do just want to take a moment to clear up any confusion here, if I can, just for a little bit. We then want to share some spend optimization strategies. We'll talk about all these fun things like procurement and my personal favorite, right sizing and licensing, and why understanding different tiers or levels of services, how to maintain an inventory of your SaaS spend and managing renewals, all that fun stuff. That could be a huge step forward in getting those cats corralled and under control. After that, we then like to share just a little case study with you all around just a real world example of ways we helped one of our customers on one of their Microsoft renewals. And then we can wrap up with some Q&A, if that sounds good. So from there, why SaaS spend is really out of control. So what's going on here? Why is everyone talking about SaaS today? Why is spend just look to be increasing and getting out of hand? I think, well, overall, we've had a shift in cloud computing. Businesses have really moved away from on-prem software in favor of SaaS solutions. So in theory, this is less to manage than, say, an entire network infrastructure or like a 30,000, mobile device fleet, something like that. But it's in the cloud, right? All of this should be easier. But SaaS has a bit of nuance and complexity, depending really solely on how it's even implemented. And how it's implemented is really where things can start to go wrong. If an organization doesn't have visibility into who or what department is using which application for which purpose, you can bet you're going to find a couple of challenges that we'll outline a little bit, especially around if you're experiencing periods of growth in remote work or hybrid work that we've seen over the past couple of years as well. So companies are more reliant on these cloud-based solutions to support their workforce. And overall, just the expansion of SaaS offerings compared to just say a decade ago. I mean, SaaS was mainly used for CRM, like a Salesforce, or productivity, like a Google Workspace or Office 365. But really, in today's world, we have SaaS covering everything from cybersecurity with CrowdStrike, HR with Workday, and finance with like NetSuite and Kyriba. And this trend's only going to continue to grow, right? Fun fact for everyone, software solutions, I think, are expected to, once again, increase this year, reaching almost, I think, around $250 billion, which is about 17% higher than last year. If you think about that for a sec, we noted that 10% of large companies, their annual revenue is spent on SaaS. And that number, I mean, if you think about it, is really only going to increase in 2025. Companies know they need SaaS solutions, whether that be the desire to move from that expensive on-prem to a more off-prem infrastructure. Any organization looking for scalability, these solutions can be accessed anywhere, and you can easily add or remove users sometimes as needed. So SaaS just seems like the answer, but with any solution, if you don't understand what you're buying, or say different departments in the organization are all ordering their own software, or if you haven't implemented a SaaS spend management practice, things can start to go off the rails pretty quickly. And many of our customers have found themselves in this exact situation. They don't know how many licenses they truly need. They've never done a utilization study on their SaaS usage. I think we noted that we found that upwards of 50% of SaaS licenses go unused today. So without proper oversight and management, without understanding the business needs, spend is going to consistently increase and get out of control. And that really brings us to our challenges. Um, and it really starts with decentralized procurement. Without central oversight, departments and employees can independently purchase SaaS tools using company credit cards, expense accounts, which inevitably lead to uncontrolled cost. You're opening yourself up to potential security risk and inefficiencies across the organization. We'll get to that in a little bit. We also found that only a fraction of our SaaS spend and apps are actually being managed centrally by IT, which I find personally odd, considering IT would be the ones managing everything from the on-prem structure and should be the go-forward source for anything off-prem. But somewhere along the lines that didn't exactly translate or come to fruition. Actually, one of our newer customers had us take a look at their recent Salesforce renewals, and we found out that two of their other divisions were also using Salesforce under different agreements and subscribing to almost exactly the same services. We actually had that organization move to one instance of Salesforce and eliminated other redundancies with things like Tableau and other Salesforce services. We then moved all six, yes, they had six individual agreements into one coterminous agreement. So this gave them volume and leverage as well as benchmarking to save them close to, I think, about $250,000 a year with Salesforce. So you can see if different departments or employees are independently purchasing SaaS applications, we have this redundancy between applications causing unnecessary cost. We have inefficiencies, and my absolute favorite of them all is shadow IT. And shadow IT continues and is continuing to be a huge blind spot because it comes with compliance and security risks, not just financial risks. Think about unauthorized SaaS purchases can lead to non-compliance with industry regulations. So HIPAA for a healthcare organization, or SOC 2 compliance for companies that handle sensitive customer data, things like that. So imagine your sensitive company data could be stored in an unproved or unvetted application. I don't know if we have any CTOs on the line or any CIOs, but I bet they would lose some sleep knowing that the risk is out there. Shadow IT really creates budget issues as well when finance teams really struggle to categorize the expenses correctly. And it's difficult to really forecast that when everything isn't centralized. Lastly, one other thing to note is any missed renewal deadlines, which can really result in higher costs and locks the organizations into unfavorable terms and potential annual uplift. So if auto renewals in contracts on unused or underutilized software go unnoticed, you're essentially wasting money every year. But if the organization doesn't have a good handle on even just a contract management piece, then you're going to miss that window to conduct any right sizing of the environment. And you need to wait, in some cases, an entire year or maybe even more to attempt to remove any of those unused or unutilized licenses or modules. We also know that many SaaS vendors align their renewal dates and upsell strategies with things like the end of the calendar year to meet annual revenue targets. I affectionately like to call this renewal season. Microsoft, as an example, often pushes renewals and true ups and licensing adjustments towards Q4. Salesforce even has an aggressive end of the year push. They offer discounts and incentives to close deals before, I think it's January 31st. ServiceNow, SAP, Workday, they all work to aggressively lock in renewals and expansion deals before that end of the year. And without a proper contract management and visibility in place, you're most likely leaving tremendous amounts of money on the table, most likely over provision for what you actually need, and you missed your opportunity to negotiate more favorable terms and conditions for your organization. Nami, if you can just move us along. Thank you. Now, I did want to take a moment. Again, I'm going to be a little nerdy. I do want to clarify what we're talking about when we mention SaaS, because I feel like even folks in the industry confuse software with infrastructure. And SaaS is really just that. It's a fully managed application, generally accessible via the internet, much like we are today. And SaaS main purpose is just that, to deliver a fully functional application, very limited core functionality modifications. It's very out of the box, maybe some user configuration settings. And this software is pretty much built based on whatever application use your organization needs. So examples of SaaS we have listed there, Office 365, Salesforce, the very platform I'm speaking to you over today, Zoom. These are all, what we consider internet or cloud-based softwares that are delivered. Infrastructure as a service is more virtualized computing resources. So think of servers, storage, networking, things like that. IaaS provides the IT teams with computing infrastructure to build out, if they so choose, their own applications. Infrastructure, it's highly scalable. Users can increase or decrease server capacity, storage, and even networking bandwidth, pretty much almost on demand. It's also not a subscription-based model, and I think that's really important. It is very much a pay-as-you-go system based on computing storage and network uses. Examples of this are AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. The simplest way I can really describe this is to think of the difference as SaaS is the already built application. It's out of the box, really no core configuration needed, just some settings here and there. And then it's really on part of your network, part of your solution, and it's up and running. And then the infrastructure piece is really the computing resources that companies would utilize instead of investing on-prem to perhaps build out their own applications and things like that. Many of our customers have both SaaS and IaaS, and we can help them manage both. But I'll save the rest of the cloud infrastructure, I think, for another series down the line. But I just wanted to clear that up just for a second before we moved on to any potential, just to avoid any potential confusion. So we've talked about challenges and why SaaS can be hard to manage. And these are really the fallout of what happens when SaaS is left unmanaged. We highlighted increased costs. Now, SaaS costs tend to increase, Nami mentioned this previously, it's an average of about 12% year over year. Most SaaS vendors will actually write in an uplift within their renewal agreements. I've seen anywhere from 10 to 15 to even higher, depending on the provider. And if you aren't careful, if you haven't negotiated that part of the contract, you're going to be in a bit of a pickle. You can negate some of this uplift through negotiations and working to get the SaaS company to potentially strike that from the contract. They usually won't pass an uplift if you negotiate, say, a longer term renewal with them. Uplifts can always be avoided, or I should say can't always be avoided. But I know from experience that they can most certainly be negotiated. I can't think of many worse things when it comes to SaaS than not realizing a contract has auto-renewed, also has a 15% uplift, and guess what? Half of your employees aren't even utilizing the application. I see this more often than not, than I care to admit, where an organization is paying also for premium tier services. When we interview them and get to the root of things, we find out that even the basic or starter tier meets 90% or 90 to 95% of their application needs. So even better was when I recently just had a conversation with a customer who was paying for multiple applications that perform the same functions. We had a customer who's a large restaurant chain, and just through discovery, we brought to their attention that they were utilizing Olo as well as Toast. And for those on the call who don't know, Olo's platform handles online ordering. They handle delivery integration and a whole suite of restaurant solutions. Toast also offers online ordering, delivery solutions, and it's really part of their POS ecosystem. So highlighting these redundancies in these applications brought to light that they can actually consolidate their solutions into one software and essentially eliminate roughly about $300,000 a year from their budget. And I think that case really highlights the scope and the cost creep of what can happen when you leave SaaS unmanaged and uncentralized. Nami, I feel like this is turning into story time hour with Ken. So
Story time's
I'll,
always good time, Ken. It's
uh,
okay.
I'll try to keep this one brief, but this is just another example that I wanted to share with everyone. And this was a really nice example with a big Microsoft renewal that we did for one of our telecom customers. So we had a mid-size customer engage us. We did a pretty good job with their telecom spend. We were saving them about 195K annually, and they were like, Ken, can you help us with our office spend as well, and maybe take a look at some Azure spend? And they were already a Microsoft customer. They knew they weren't probably getting the best rates, and we had our suspicions that a lot of the licensing could either be reduced to a lower tier or really just removed completely. So we examined their contracts, obviously, thoroughly. We called out any uplifts, T's and C's, things that generally might be even given away for free in a renewal. As well as we conducted a utilization study with Microsoft. For those who don't know, you have every right to ask the vendor for a utilization study of your usage of their software. And we did just that. We focused on licensing to reduce unnecessary expenses without boring everyone to death. Specifically, we took a lot of the F3 licenses and we brought them down to an E1 license. And those are really generally used for mobile employees or devices that really only need the cloud applications. They don't need the full desktop suite. They don't need Teams. They don't need anything like that. And all the while ensuring that their operations would continue to maintain effortlessly and efficiently. We also negotiated a fair discount on those licenses. So I mentioned the E1 license, but also the E3, the F3, and the E5 licensing, as well as the Windows Server licensing. So after we felt like we had a good handle on where the organization needed to be from a license perspective, we then injected some competitive pressure using our benchmarking and even going as far as getting some competitive quotes from a few VARs. And in the end, they actually re-signed directly with Microsoft. They had much better visibility in terms of what they needed and clearly at an excellent price. And we were able to save them a good 700 plus $1,000 over the course of their 3-year agreement
That's a
with
great story,
Microsoft.
Ken. That's a good chunk of change to put back into your business. So that's fantastic.
Yep.
That was a good story. It was worth it.
Thank you. I tried my best to put on a good story. So I do want to be mindful of time. So I do want to just talk about some SaaS optimization strategies if we can. One of the most important things an organization can do right from the start to reduce waste, control cost, and really improve efficiency is around that visibility. Even starting off simply with an inventory, I don't care if it's built on an Excel sheet, will start to paint a clearer picture on what software the organization is using. Even getting your hands around when those contract end dates or when things are coming to term, and what add-ons or terms and conditions should be noted before that renewal. Great to note if something is auto-renewed and what the actual, term of the agreement is. It's powerful information to know. Next, I would start to set up some flags or notifications. Um, I don't care if you set up Outlook calendar reminders, but generally you want to start the renewal process and prepare for those negotiations roughly about 4 to 6 months before that contract is set to expire. It's going to give you that window, that buffer to really tackle any waste, really understand where you need to be from a licensing and what you're actually using before you go to the next step within the negotiation. And there's just building out a baseline inventory is going to help you get that much needed visibility. It's not going to be an easy task. That's why we're here to help, especially if procurement hasn't been or has been decentralized. But I would also suggest speaking with finance to start running some reporting on which carriers are potentially being paid and those dollar amounts. That can really start you on your Easter egg or herding of cats adventure. The next item is centralized procurement. I know I've kind of talked about this a lot, but when we talk about tackling this sprawl, duplicating subscriptions and cost overruns, without that centralized procurement process, you will not be able to solve the problem of departments buying similar tools independently. You'll still be paying more for smaller siloed purchases and still at risk for that shadow IT spend and all the security and compliance risks that come with that. So generally, I would suggest implementing a centralized procurement process through IT as they can ensure, the one security, manage the software integration, and then also help with the monitoring of the usage and licensing. However, it's not a bad idea, and this is where I think SIB fits in nicely, being that seat between finance and IT, is to actually get finance involved as well, so they can start tracking the SaaS spending, ensuring the return on the investment from that software, and can work with IT in conjunction to finalize the contracts and optimize vendor payments. I promise I won't say right sizing too long. If you've made this a drinking game, I can't blame you. But right sizing licenses, I feel like we touched on, I get it quite a bit. But as I mentioned previously, most major SaaS vendors, or if you're working with a VAR today, can provide you with those utilization studies. Never in my experience has a company ever come to me and said, Ken, you're not using our software as much as you should. You have all these licenses just sitting here. We want to help you save cost. That's not going to happen in a perfect world, maybe. But this is where I highly rely on those utilization studies to help the organization identify needs. I know I've stressed it enough. It is an important step before going to negotiation. It's going to help you downgrade where you need to. It's going to help consolidate where previously you didn't have any. And it's really going to eliminate any unnecessary subscriptions. But it's also going to assist you with better negotiating those contracts. Trust me when I say finance is going to be happier. This will not only keep unnecessary costs down, but it's also going to help plan budgets more accurately. Right sizing is really one of the biggest exercises we perform here at SIB because I know the importance of ensuring you're only paying for what you're purchasing. You're only purchasing what you need. Once you know what software your organization, is purchasing, you've got procurement fairly well established, and you know the quantity and that level of service you're going to require from the software company. And now comes time to everyone's fun favorite part, negotiations with the vendor. I promise this isn't as bad as it sounds. And whether this be, an initial contract or renewal, I feel at SIB, we really do a great job of utilizing benchmarking as a great tool to provide insights into competitive pricing. We actually utilize our technology to access about 200,000, 20,000 products to benchmark. And we have over like 3,200 unique supplier data points within that benchmarking. And to date, we've negotiated roughly about 40,000 new or renewal contracts over the past 5 years. And we can generally benchmark an existing quote in under 48 hours. I know I'm flexing there a little bit, but I just want to highlight how important it is to leverage benchmarking to ensure competitive advantage and to strengthen your negotiations with vendors. It's tough to argue when you have data-driven insights and you're telling the provider you know that your peers are paying, 20% less, say for the same Microsoft license. It's going to allow you to ensure you aren't overpaying. We also love to provide, I'll speak for myself, but I love to provide alternative solutions and their costs to the customers. It's a way to strategically inject competitive pressure into the negotiation. You're not saying you're going to switch. You're just saying, I know what else is out there and I know what it's going to cost me. Um, Additionally, I feel that some organizations forget just how important SLAs are and how a vendor isn't meeting those SLAs, what a powerful negotiating tool that can be as well. Imagine the power of telling a supplier you've had product related issues or concerns during implementation, or the provider missed SLAs with downtimes and maintenance and things like that. I used to be on the other end of that conversation when it came to putting, seeds in the doubt in a vendor's mind, and they're most likely going to go to bat for you when it comes to those pricing and terms after hearing some of those additional points that you can bring to the table. And we aren't afraid to leverage our relationships here with some value-added resellers to gain better access to more competitive pricing as well. And with that, finally, it's really rinse and repeat. Once that contract's been signed, you've tracked those renewal dates, you're staying on top of those contracts set to expire. You don't want to be in the same position you were previously. I think of SaaS and also cloud as TEM expense management on steroids. And it really is. And if you fall into the same bad habits, you're going to wind up in the exact same place where you started, which is why I love working here at SIB, being that strategic partner and making sure you're on top of those contract auto renews with your chance to right size. You're definitely going to want costs, you don't want those costs to start creeping up again. Once you've done the entire long tail process, and I gave you a little bit of the secret sauce here, managing those renewals keeps everything on track and avoids having to go through a lot of these arduous tasks again. And then the final end result, you know, once your SaaS review is complete and you've implemented these strategies, you have a very streamlined SaaS portfolio. It should align with your business needs, and you have tremendous, powerful visibility into that. You've hopefully eliminated as much sprawl as possible. You have no redundant tools. You're not seeing your cost increase too much. Again, if you need to buy more, cost will increase. But again, you can leverage negotiation tactics there as well. If any additional needs arise or for renewal on a contract, you're really prepared to tackle any of that uplift. And really, you're just setting yourself up and positioning yourself for a much easier negotiation. And IT can certainly sleep better at night knowing the organization isn't at risk with security issues with unauthorized applications. So really, all this is truly the perfect state and your reward for herding all those cats.
Ken, I'm going to hang here for a minute. I do have a question that's popped up that I'm going to ask you from the group. So, how do you work with MSPs, MSP firms to help our clients? And I know you brought up some of the past relationships we've got that we leverage when we need to, but I think in particular with MSPs, how you typically engage with them.
Yeah, and I actually really enjoy working with MSPs. Actually, one of our sister orgs is actually an MSP, and MSPs will go through a very similar exercise. They want to understand the business. They want to understand your business needs, and they're very focused as well on helping to right size. And then also the MSPs will obviously come forward. They generally put their best foot forward when it comes to pricing. And also, not to just speak about ourselves, but our MSP is a full Microsoft shop as well, and they can also assist with troubleshooting, help desk, and things like that. So there's also an additional layer of support that comes along with the MSPs as well.
All right. Um, just to kind of bring us home a bit, I know if we've got more questions, we'll certainly take those as well. Just to share some of the more common questions we get. I know you talked a lot about centralized procurement and shadow IT. When we have some really large organizations and even think about government agencies that run multiple businesses, and not by design, but end up running in silos in some parts, where would you suggest that those large types of organizations that are fragmented really start with?
Yeah, and it all starts with just getting the organization aligned and on board with looking to conduct a SaaS audit.
Mhm.
That's essentially overall what we've been talking about here. And I would start pretty much just like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Nami, starting with finance, finding out who your providers are, finding out where those contracts lie, understanding those terms, those conditions, and then just start driving from there. Don't be afraid to partner with a strategic partner such as us to help with utilization studies, things like that. And also going to bat for you. Not everyone loves negotiating. I do. I'm fairly passionate about it. I love saving organizations money. It's been a thing for me for the past 20 years, but I would definitely start there, just understanding where everything is, get that audit started, and just drive that message out to the organization that this is what we're going to be conducting. We need your help with these following areas.
And I think, kind of in line with the second point here on the screen, I think is it fair to say, Ken, the audit, the utilization reviews, the negotiations, and the getting new terms is really not a one and done kind of exercise, because through the life of that contract, I heard you say earlier, um, that spend tends to sprawl. So how do you really stay on top of that? Is that really just a full-time job, or how do you stay on top of that to make sure it's not going out of control and folks aren't getting surprised?
Well, it can be a full-time job, but I mentioned the contracts and understanding your terms and conditions, your SLAs, but
Mhm.
also your contract end dates. And us here at SIB, I know we know like a lot of the times I referred to it earlier as SaaS renewal season. Knowing when those things are occurring. And again, I don't care if it's done on a simple spreadsheet. I still love Excel from time to time, but using that to your advantage, knowing those contract end dates, knowing when things are set for renewal, it's important. Do I have a 3-year term? Do I have a 5-year term? Am I month to month? Am I year over year? That's going to help you. And not to say spend doesn't always increase, right? If you're subscribing to more solutions, I would expect spend to increase, but you should be able on top of it to be able to take an existing provider and negotiate further. If you're subscribing to more of their services and leveraging more of their platform, then I would expect spend, yes, to increase, but your discount on what you're currently, subscribed to decrease. So
Yeah.
really the best practices, and it is, so you don't have to go through that arduous tale of, oh, now I got to right size again. It may sound like a harsh exercise to go through. It's painful at first, but if you continue to implement these practices, it does get easier and easier over time.
All right. One thing, before we kind of wrap up, I just wanted to point out, and it's not really a question, but it might turn into one. You mentioned SLAs before. Just in my time working with IT, and even in some conversations you and I have had, what I thought was really interesting is that there's a lot of opportunities where folks are maybe overpaying for SLAs, where they maybe got the luxury package, for lack of better
Mhm.
words, and didn't need it. It might be interesting. I'd just love to hear from you. What are maybe one of the more common mistakes or opportunities you see when it comes to looking at service level agreements?
Yeah, and we actually saw this not that long ago. I mean, we called out
Hmm.
someone was paying for training, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention the provider, but training on a platform. Well, you're asking my organization to utilize your platform, right? We need to be users of this platform to get the benefit of it. Why am I paying for training? Training is not a premium service, in my mind. And I've negotiated things like that off contracts fairly frequently with pretty high success. So there's definitely some low-hanging fruit, I would call it, in the SLAs that can definitely be leveraged. And I don't know where I picked up this saying, but I'll just say it. If it's taxable, it's negotiable. There's a lot that can be negotiated.
Yeah, I'll
In
say
the deals.
until that moment, I didn't even think to think that training should just be a given. I think we just assume that that's something you have to pay for, and I know before talking to you, I hadn't realized that maybe it's not. So,
Yep.
good call.
Thank you.
All right. So I think we've got a couple more things. We're just about to wrap up, and I want to make sure we're staying on time. So I'll just let you wrap it up, and maybe you can leave our audience, Ken, with just if everybody was to remember one thing leaving here, what would be the one thing that you'd want everybody to remember?
Like I said, hopefully everyone's not playing a drinking game when I talk about right sizing. If not, well, they're having a very happy afternoon if they are. Um, but that's really the essential piece is that beginning, getting that visibility, then going into your right sizing, and then it should make contract negotiations far easier than most people feel. Um, I notice we are catfishing some folks on the call with my older photo. I apologize for that. It's not that old, but a hairstyle change nonetheless. But hopefully everyone enjoyed this presentation. Clearly, hopefully you could see we're very passionate about what we do here. We have tons of knowledge and expertise within the organization. If anyone wants to talk further about SaaS or even cloud infrastructure or telecom or anything else, feel free to reach out, schedule a call. I wouldn't even mind, even if you want to, bug me a little bit on benchmarking. Maybe look at some of your spend you want to have benchmarked, or just get a feel for if you're in the ballpark of what you should be spending for some of your SaaS services. So not to be too long-winded, I'll leave it there. Um,
No, thanks.
but
That's
that's
great,
it.
Ken. Yeah, I appreciate it. I will just say for anybody, for folks on the call, we'll certainly make sure we get everything tied up with the recording. We'll send out a recording in the next couple of days and the content as well, and you'll have our information. But if you don't, be sure to follow myself, Ken, SIB. We're on all the channels, everything from Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. And keep an eye out because we'll have a lot more of these sessions, not just across IT, but across a number of different areas. And we're looking forward to hearing from you and working with you this year. Thanks again. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.